Okay, I think we're better start. This presentation is called Getting to Grips with the APEX Interactive Grid API, and I'm Matt Mulvaney. I now work for a company called Explorer, based in Leeds in the UK. So we say Explorer solve problems with Oracle technology, develop bespoke applications, and support our customers. So those are the three things: solve, develop, and support. I work in the development team. There are other teams within Explorer, and the development team specializes exclusively in Oracle Application Express. We also provide Oracle Cloud Service, and you can see from the rosettes we are winners 3 years in a row of UK OUG Database Partner of the Year award. We have Oracle Engineers Systems Practice, and we provide Oracle support for our customers. Okay, so the presentation is called Getting to Grips with the Interactive Grid API, and this is a phrase that I've used before, getting to grips, and definitely one that I've heard mentioned several times. So I thought, what does it actually mean, and what's the origin of that phrase? So when you type into Google, define getting to grips, apparently the answer is when two wrestlers get hold of each other and they start to fight, then they get into grips. So you can see from the picture there, there's two wrestlers, looks like they're starting a fight, starting to wrestle, they're starting to feel and understand each other and understand each other's skills and starting to learn about each other. So that's the theme of this presentation, start to learn about the Interactive Grid API. Okay, so in preparation for this presentation, I had to draw lots of sources of information together. And the first picture on this left-hand side is the front cover of an Explorer course. So Explorer do lots of APEX courses for various different levels. And this is the front cover of the Interactive Grid 2-day course. It's a 59-page document, and there's lots of supporting files which come with that as well. So I wrote this course, and I often refer to those files when developing any new Interactive Grid work. Right at the top, there's Oracle Developer Community. If you've not signed up to that, it's a big forum where you can go and if you need any assistance, you can ask a question, or you can read other people's questions or other people's responses to those questions. And if you ask an Interactive Grid question, there's a good chance that it'll be answered by John Snyders, who's the primary developer on the APEX team for the Interactive Grid. So it's monitored by John and other APEX team developers. So John Snyders has also worked on 2 applications. The first one is a sample Interactive Grids package application. So if you wanted to install that package application, you just go to package applications in APEX and download it into your workspace. And the good thing about package applications is if you see something you like in there, you can find out how it was made and copy it into your applications. So there are lots of good information in that. The second application is the Interactive Grid Cookbook, and that extends upon the concepts you see in the package application. So you can download the cookbook from the Hardlike Software blog, which is John Snyders' blog, and he's updated that at least once. So there's lots of good information in there. If you want to use it though, first install the package application first, because it sets up a lot of tables and data which the cookbook relies upon. John has also written a 4-part blog on how to hack the Interactive Grid. I've just showing part 1 there. But they're all really good reads, lots of information in there. And there's a new edition, so this, you probably can't read it from where you sat, but this is the beta documentation for 18.1, the next version of APEX. So I've clicked on the documentation for model, so you'll hear me talk about model quite a bit during this presentation. And you can now see notifications, there's methods, and there's some other stuff in there as well. So one of the methods is called fetch all, which I'll demonstrate a bit later on. Now, pulling this all together is the Interactive Grid cheat sheet. So this is described as a collection of blog forums posts related to APEX Grid from version 5.1 and above. So this pulls lots of blogs and forum posts together, and it includes lots of code samples as well. And in fact, the very first code sample on there I use over and over again, and I'll demonstrate that piece of code running. I also have all these bookmarks as well, so I'm regularly visiting these bookmarks when I'm developing anything new for the interactive grid. Okay. Right, so with learning anything new or anything new for the first time, you'll start to learn about defining and declaring variables, certain special types we'll come across, and any logic. So here you'll see if A equals B or equivalent of B. So for anyone familiar with JavaScript, you will recognize that statement. That's how you do an expression in JavaScript. Because you interact with the Interactive Grid API using JavaScript commands. So I'll start off kind of basic. If you're unfamiliar with JavaScript, I'll start off quite basic, just introducing a few concepts. And then towards the end of the presentation, there'll be a bit more advanced things. Then I'll be looping around definitely the model. So the model is like a subset of the available data. So your interactive grid is based on a SQL statement, which might bring back 200 records. The model is just a subset of that, but I'll go on and explain that a bit more in detail later on. And there's various functions I'm going to call from the API: fetch all, get selected records, set records, set value, those kind of things. Okay, so the agenda for today is, for those of you unfamiliar with an interactive grid, I'll just give you a quick introduction to it, and it will be a quick introduction. And then we'll go on to the next two together. So API fundamentals, and then what we'll learn about the API will apply to configuring features available or not available in the interactive grid. So turning things on and off. So after those two, we'll do a bit of a recap, and then I'll explain about the model in more detail and what the basics are and how to understand it a bit better. And then the final bit will be building upon knowledge. So a bit more advanced things now. So looking at buttons, menu items, menu entries for the row menu and the selection actions menu. Okay, so introduction to the interactive grid. And it'll be quick. Okay, so this is the application which we'll be working through. So you can see on the page here, I've got an interactive grid. It's definitely an editable one because it's got these extra tools like a checkbox here, and it's got some menu entries against each record or for all the ones I select. It's actually got some additional buttons here called edit and save and add row. But it's quite similar in presentation to the interactive report. So I can do the same things that I could do with the interactive report. So search for something like salesman. I can see some salesmen there. What can I do? I can add, some of these have got a letter T in their name, so I can search on T. I can temporarily deactivate a filter, put them back, remove it completely. I can save my report, save it as a primary or alternate report, and then I can press reset there and it goes back to the basics. Yeah. Each column has got a sort on it. So I've got department there. I can sort ascending or descending. Let's reset that. Or if I click it, I can use a control break. So you can see here's my employees of department 10, of 20, and 30. If users are familiar with Excel, you can also freeze columns. Wasn't expecting that. Yep, freeze column there. So if I move that a bit wider, you can see I can scroll left and right throughout my records. Yeah. I can also add a chart view. So you're seeing at the moment the grid view. So there are other views. There's a chart view, there's an icon, and there's a detail view. But let's look at the chart view. Let's maybe get a pie chart. Let's get the average salary per job. So it's a jet pie chart, and then I move back to my grid view and back to the chart view. Yeah, and I can save all these. So the great feature about the interactive grid over the interactive report is you can edit records as you see them on the screen. So I could double click, or I can press the edit button here. I can change someone's name, give someone an extra euro on there. So when I press save now, those are saved to the database. Those two updates are done practically at the same time. Refresh now, they've been reloaded from the database, and those have changed. So I can make any kind of change like that. I can add a new row, put my name in, and I can fill out all these fields here. So this might be better as a select list, pop-up LOV. You can change all these things. You can also delete a record. You can see those are now got the line through. Those have the strike through effect. So when I press save now, I won't do it to protect my data, but I expect this record to be added, inserted, Matt. It probably would complain about lack of details at this point. But any updates that I've done, this record to be deleted and report back any errors all at the same time. Okay, so those are the main features then of the interactive grid. Okay, so that was a quick recap. So now we'll go to the next level. So we'll look at the API fundamentals, and what we learn from that, we'll apply it to feature configuration. So I'm going to move to the next page. This is the same interactive report on another page. So it's the same SQL, the same table, the employees table. Right, if I edit that page, it opens up in Page Designer, and under Attributes, if I scroll down to the bottom, you've got JavaScript code there. So if you click on the JavaScript code, and the help is shown in this tab over here, you've got an example piece of code. So if I paste that in, let's pop that up. You see that? So that says functions options, and then options.toolbar equals false, return options. So I'm going to guess there, we're going to turn the toolbar off. So you run it, no toolbar. See there's a few little pixels at the top? I think there's an issue being raised to maybe remove those extra pixels at the top. Okay, so that's all the help we get at this point, definitely in 5.1, that's all you get to turn the toolbar off. There's no additional information about it. So we can open this now and start to ask some questions about it. So, okay, we're turning the toolbar false, but what else can it do? So let's just remove that for the moment. And that actually is, those two lines is, apart from being blank altogether, that's the minimum JavaScript you can put in there. So the function options is like the configuration object, and then we're going to do some things with it. In the previous case, we remove the toolbar, and then we return that new object full of options. But before we return it, let's just see what it is. So I use console log options. So the toolbar should be back. Yeah. So if I drop into console, F12, you can see there's an object there. Okay. Okay, so there's some interesting things here. There's Ajax columns, a very long ID, and then there's Ajax identifier, a shorter ID. I've never used those two. There's some other things like appearance. Show null value is a dash. Well, this is a null value here, and that's a dash. Okay, that adds up. Some information about my columns. So there's ename, yeah, that's one. Job, that's one. Row ID, I don't remember row ID. So if you open up row ID and drill into the information you see is hidden, is true. So okay, a hidden column. So you find out lots of information about your columns in there. Let's collapse that. Editable, there's allowed operations. Some ID there, there's features. Download, and this is an array of two entries, CSV and HTML. Let's double check that. Download, CSV, HTML. Okay, these are adding up now. I've given it a static ID of emp, and I give it a static ID of emp because it is the employees table, and the second reason is because there's lots of blogs and articles and forum posts all using the word emp as well, so you can reuse that code quite easily. I've got pagination, show row total count is true. Okay, so let's try to modify some of these features now and just see what happens. So I'll copy my example piece of code in. So this is the same code. Function options, console log options, return. But we'll do some more things. So we'll change that show null value. So we'll say options, appearance, show null value, and we'll just send in a null value. You've got to get the case absolutely correct. So I always double check it. So appearance, show capital N, capital V. Okay, that's the one I wanted. And let's remove one of the download formats. So options, features, download formats. Options, features, download formats. And because this is an array, I want to remove something, delete something. And in JavaScript, you pop a value off. So it pops the HTML off. So that's what I will use. So if I run that, you can see I've started to customize the interactive grid now. I've removed the dash from there. That's gone. Let's look at download formats. Download. Okay, so I've removed HTML. So I'm starting to begin to customize my interactive grid now. What's more is you can change things at column level as well. So if I hover over ename, you can see I can sort ascending or descending. Job, I can do the same. So let's maybe remove the sort on ename. Let's reset that. So if I find my column, that's got the same thing, a JavaScript code there. Okay, let's do exactly the same steps we did before. Go to help and copy it in. Right, a tip for this, if you want to copy this in, there's some issue with the help on 5.1. So forget that final character and paste it in. So similar code, functions, options, and then we've not seen this one before. Options, features equal options, features, or a blank object. Okay. So we'll come to that a bit later on. But it looks like we're going to turn the sort attribute of the features object to be false. So turning the sort off. So same steps as before. We'll run it. We can't sort on there. We could there. We can't there. Okay. So we're customizing things at column level. So let's try a few more things. So we know, let's put a couple more in. We know if we click on there, we can control break and we can hide the column. So let's have a guess. Control break. And hide is false. Okay, so no control break, but the hide is still there. We've not managed to remove it. So when I first saw this and the help which was available, I thought, well, where are all the commands? Do I have to guess at what they all are? Hide didn't work. Well, what's it actually called? Well, it's actually called can hide. Now you've got these things in the beta documentation, so you can see the documentation. See now I can not hide the column. So I thought surely there must be more information about the interactive grid. Must be more options than I can see. So here's all my available options, and there's not much really that I can configure. Surely there must be more, and there is more. And if you read John Snyder's blogs, or you can get this line of code from the cheat sheet. You can paste that in, and what that's doing is effectively asking the grid for all the configuration options. So now when I run that, you know, it shares some similarities. There's both these long IDs, but there's way more features available. You know, I can turn lazy loading on or off. There was more features in features, so as flashbacks appeared, filters appeared. There's way more options that I can configure. So let's start to configure some. So what can we do? So in text, we've got one called add row button, add row. So that's the button, you might be able to see it here, add row. So we can change the text of that. And under toolbar, we can do some more things. So there's the save button, that's enabled, true. So let's disable that. Let's configure some of these things. So I'm just going to remove this. Oops, just remove this from the column itself, and we'll go back to the attributes of the grid. So the first one was options, text, add row button. I always like to double check. Text, add row button, capital R, capital B. And we'll call that click to add new row. So now we'll run it. And we see no grid. Yeah? If you ever see a no grid while you're working with the interactive grid API, and you definitely don't see the developer toolbar, you've got a JavaScript console error. So if you press F12, you can see cannot set property add row button of undefined. Okay, but I thought we could do that in the configuration. Okay, that is because if I just comment that out, I want to put it in the text object. And when I console log it out, there is actually no text there. So this is where we need to borrow that trick we saw from the column setting, where we say options text equals it like itself or a blank object. So that'll give us, we can actually see, that'll just give us a blank object called text. Great, nothing in there. So we'll put something in there now, and we'll put in there click to add a new row, and that should work this time. So I've changed the label, click to add a new row. Okay, so now we know how to add additional things in that are not already there. Let's do some more things. Let's put my name in for no reason. So it's options Matt Mulvaney is true. There's no actual impact on the grid of this. It doesn't give you more functionality or less functionality. It's just an additional way of you putting information into the grid, configuration options, and then taking it out later. You might do it with a hidden item or collection or whatever, but this is just like another way. Right, we have no toolbar, so object, so we'll put one in, and then we can start to put things in. Sorry, not that one. We'll put the toolbar in, and then we'll remove our save button. Okay, so we've outputted our object. I've got my name in there, so it has no effect, but I can pull it out of there later on. The other things we've done is we've removed the save button. That's actually gone now. Did we do anything else? Save button's gone, my name's in, and we already added the new text there. Okay. So before I move on, I'll show you this. So when I first saw the JavaScript column level here and grid level, I thought I'm not really a big fan of seeing lots of JavaScript in probably every single column, and then my attributes as well, scattered all over the place. I thought I need to centralize it in one place. So under attributes, if I replace it with this, I can actually configure my columns at grid level using my own function called setIgColumn. I won't go into how this works, but if you Google or look at the Explorer website for getting to grips with the interactive grid, you can download this application, you can see the presentation again and that kind of thing. So this is, you pass in a column name, feature sort is false, and it turns off the ability to sort on ename. Now this is slightly different. I'm not using options, I'm using config all the way through. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as it's not a reserved word. Some blogs you'll see options, and some blogs you'll see config. It doesn't really have an effect, but for maybe your team's coding standards, it's best to pick something which is consistent and use that throughout your application. So when I run that now, I can't sort on that column. I can do it on that column. So it's like centralizing it. Yeah. So if you want to see that, you can have this application and see how it works. So let's do a little recap. So we've looked at the minimal configuration. That was function options, return options. We've applied a console log to output our options before returning it. So we've seen what the interactive grid configuration contains, which is like a small amount. We've configured the features of the interactive grid at region level and at column level. And then we thought, surely there's more options than exists than we can see. So we asked the grid for those options, and then we could configure those hidden features using that little trick from the column level, if required. Okay. So let's move on to model basics. So, a new page. So now we're on the third page, and we're using a different table. The employees table, I only had 14 records, and I'm using the orders table now because it's got more records. It's got 105 records. So if I scroll down to the bottom, you can see I've got 105 records at the bottom. So depending on how you scroll, I'm pressing F5. If you scroll fast, you see a bit of white space because it's loading and fetching more records into the model. Yeah? Now I know when I go to the top, the model does not contain all amount of records. And we can see how the model works by running these famous 5 commands, which you'll see on the cheat sheet. So if I paste them in, it's just defining 5 variables. But whenever I like to do some interactive grid coding, I usually start with these, at least the first 3 commands. So if I type widget, I can find some HTML information about the interactive grid widget. Okay, not terribly exciting that. However, if I ask for the grid view of the interactive grid there, of the grid widget, I'm getting this view, not the chart view, not the icon or detail view, but the grid view. So sometimes you see a blog or a forum post where it says it's declared as the word view or grid view. In this case, I'm just calling it grid. So let's have a look at grid. Okay, you can see there's lots of functions available. So get selected records. Well, I've got one selected record right at the top. I can refresh the grid, I can resize columns, I can get menu entries, so various different things. Very interesting there. One of the aspects is called the model. So if I collapse that, I've already defined it there, grid.model. So if I type model in, not as many functions. I can see there's a total of records, 105, but this is interesting, this is called data. So if I open this up, this appears to be my data. So 2458 is the first ID, that's the right one, 2458. Next one, 2397, yes. So these are my records. It contains all the data for all the rows. However, there's only 50 that the model is aware of, 50 records. If I type model underscore data length, you can see there I've got 50 records. So 50 records appears to be at least the amount I can see on the screen, plus a bit more should I decide to scroll down. So if I scroll down a bit and ask for that count again, it's still 50. If I scroll down again, let's get to about halfway. Oh, 100. So it's done a fetch. It's added more records to the model there. And if we get all the way down to the bottom, well, let's try about there. 105, okay. Reach the bottom. So the model's now full with all the information. So if I ask for model data again, I get an array of 105 records. That's everything. Okay. So the other things I defined when I ran that was selection. I've just got one element, and that's the record selected there. Yeah, if I had 2, it would return an array of 2. And the last thing I've got is a record. So I want to get that specific record, that first one. And the way to use it is called model.getRecord, which is that function. And then I pass in the column which I decide is the primary key. So here I've got the order ID as the primary key. Now that's a number, but I prefer to at least quote it when I pass it into this function. I've had strange effects when passing in a number, so I always at least quote it or double quote it, it's fine. But also now I'm getting into the habit of square bracketing the thing as well, because that's sending it in as an array, which If you have primary key over many columns, you can just comma separate those in and pass them all in, and you can get the whole record. So now, those are the basics. I'm setting a bunch of variables there. So let's do some interesting things. Let's get some of the column values. So here you can just see from my record, I've got data. I don't know which one is which. Order status is a 0, but if I wanted to get order status, I don't want to get like the fifth one along. So there's a better way of asking for columns. So I can say model.getValue, record, what I define there, order total. You just pass in the column name as you see it over here. You don't have to give it a static ID or anything special. So order total is 9999. That appears to be correct. And I could pass in order status and get a 0. Let's change that get value to set value. Maybe I should make that bigger. To set value. And let's set it to 999. If I run that, it says NC. NC means not changed. Because it was 9999 before, so it's not changed anything. However, let's change it to something else. Let's change it to all threes. And it says set. Really? And you look up there, and it's already been set to all the threes. So it's like the grid is in sync all the time with the model. You change the model, it's reflected in the grid straight away. It's all in sync. So that's sufficient now. So I could just press save. I won't do it to protect my data, but I could actually save that into the database. So now we know how to get the elements of the interactive grid and down to column level. Let's do some looping now. Let's loop through the model. So to do this, I might reset my page. Paste the 5 in again. And paste in some prepared code. So I'm saying model for each. So go through each record of the model, and each time you go around it, call each record R. I'm getting the primary key, and then I'm also getting some information about the record to see if it's deleted or not. So basically, if it's not deleted, I want to set the order total to 565, just if it's not deleted. So if I run that code, you can see now every single record has been set to 565. Every single one, all the way down, right to the, not quite the bottom. So it's missed 5 records off. So why did it do that? Because I reloaded the page, and the model at that point contained 100 records out of the 105. It wasn't completely full. But now, because I've scrolled down to the bottom, it is completely full. So there should be no issues with me running that code again. Run it again, top to bottom, 0 to, well, the first one to 105, they've all been set to 565. So now you understand it. If you ever needed a piece of code which looped through the model like that, you don't really want to say to the users, can you just scroll down to the bottom before hitting that button? But there is a better way. The better way is, type those in again. If you're on at least version 5.1.1, you get this new fetch all, well, it used to be new, fetch all function. So if I call that, it runs a series of fetches to get the chunks of information in until the model's full with all your data from your SQL query. Obviously, this is going to take a long time if you've got thousands of records, but I've only got 105. Even with the 105, I can still detect a fraction of a second before it loads it completely. So this like emits an object, and I call it progress. If it's got an attribute of done, I know that the model's been fully populated with database records. If it doesn't return that attribute of done, it's like a progress indicator. So you could do like a scroll bar or something, or you could do some kind of progress indicator. But if I hit my enter button now, I can detect a fraction of a second before it says populated records. So now it's populated records. I'll run the same piece of code again, set them all to 565, and now this time they should all be done. 565, all the way to the very bottom. So that's the way to do it. Okay, let's move on then. So let's move on to building our knowledge, and the first thing I want to look at is buttons, and then after buttons, we'll have a look at menu entries. So on buttons, I've got a button at the top called My Button, and if I click it, it says 1 record selected. Okay, let's pick a few. 3 records selected. Okay, this is the order tables, by the way, so let's pick all 105. 40, okay. Same reason. Need to scroll down a bit, scroll back up, deselect. How many I've got this time? So it's something to be aware about when having a select list there and you've got scroll pagination. Okay, so if this was an interactive report, you would just go to Page Designer, click on the Gallery tab, drag a button up, let go, right of interactive search bar, and it would appear. So if I quick edit that button, I should be able to edit it. Okay, so if you quick edit, you can't pick anything other than the grid. I'm a big fan of quick edit. You can't pick columns, you can't pick buttons or anything. So if I click to load the page, no worries, I'll just find the button under rendering. Okay, can't find it. So the button doesn't exist. You cannot put a button on using drag and drop with the Page Designer. Where is it there? So the way you put a button on, if you read John Snyder's blogs, is under attributes. Surprise is JavaScript configuration. Now I've got how many? 30 lines of code just to put that single button on, and that doesn't include the action of when you hit the button, what does it do? So it's a significant amount of code. So I'll go over this quickly, but I'm defining a bunch of variables here. I'm grabbing the toolbar data group. So the toolbar data group is everything here along the top, which consists of 7 toolbars. This is a toolbar, actions is on its own in a toolbar, toolbar there, toolbar here. So I'm looking for a toolbar called actions for using toolbar find. How do I know it's called actions for? Well, the same way I learned everything about the interactive grid just by console logging things and finding out what things are. So here are the names of the toolbars. Actions for is right on the end. So I define a button. Important, I must say what the action is. And then I'm going to, instead of using push, I'm going to use splice. Splice so I can put the button anywhere I want. It didn't look right at the end. I wanted my reset button to be on the end. And then I return the toolbar data. And then I define my action. So should you hit the button, this is the action. You can also define a label and a tooltip if you want. So I've got a tooltip, it says my tooltip. So should you hit that button, call this dynamic action of document and my button. So under dynamic actions, I've got a custom dynamic action looking for document my button. And in there, I won't go into the detail of this, but I'm using the get selected records and the length of it, and then using that show page success. So it's the nice green icon, a nice green notification there, and show me how many records got selected. Okay, so that's a lot of code, you might think, 30 lines just to put a button on, to call a dynamic action, which does the action. Surely there must be a better way of doing this. Yes, there is a better way of doing this. So there has been a plugin called Extend Toolbar, written by Marco, which I would recommend this. So this is behind a condition at the moment. That's the one. So in this plugin, you say which group you want. Well, the last group. You know, what's the label? What's the icon? You know, position. So all the things you need declaratively without writing the JavaScript. And it can even trigger the same dynamic action, that one called my button. So that works in exactly the same way, the same dynamic action. So that is the easier way of adding buttons to your toolbar. If you're going to use that, make sure that the dynamic action has got the same conditions as the interactive grid and the same build options, that kind of thing, else things can go out of sync. Okay, actions is the last one. So we're going to add some entries to here. So I'm going to select a record in context. You can only ever select one record, and I'm going to add a button to say which record is this. So it returns the primary key. So in real life, you might want to say process order or refund customer for this order, that kind of thing. But I'll just show you the primary key, and that should be, sufficient. So if you look at the How to Hack the Interactive Grid blog by John Snyders, he says, run this piece of code. So we'll paste that one in. So those are the 3 variables that I've been setting throughout the presentation, and then one more. We'll get the grid row menu, and then we'll push on an entry to that, and we'll get the record in context. Now the record in context is the one next to your button here. Now this always returns an array, even though there's only ever one record in context. So anyway, I'm just going to get the first element of that array, and then I'll get the order ID using that get value, which I showed you earlier. So I run that, and it says 10. 10's a bit odd. So 10 is the 10th entry in this menu. So I've got, including separators. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, that's the one. And it tells me which record I've got selected. So the next one should be 2397. Yeah. 2354. Yeah, is the right one. So John also points out that if you have, I'll reset the page. If you have an alternate view to the grid on page load, so this is the chart view, you cannot run that code. So if I paste that in, error. There's no menu, there's no model, there's no grid, it hasn't been created. So you have to wait for the user to click onto there in order to put that menu entry on. So it says this is the way to do it. More JavaScript. So if I go to page 5, same code, and I'll call in it add menu entry, which record is this? So it says when you encounter the event interactive grid view change, which the grid emits, so it fires it then. I'm changing grid view now. So every time I click it changes view. And it's the grid, and it's just been created, because you don't want multiple entries, then add it. And we'll say console log, and it can tell me when it's been added. So if I run that now, nothing in the console, nothing. Click there, detects it, it says it's been added, and now it's been added. So that's the way John recommends to do it. You can also do the same thing at selections level. So if I select a lot of records, I can add things into there. So I might want to say, what's the total orders? So the same thing, I'm going to paste that in, wait for the grid to be created. And now I've got total selected orders. All the 9s, that should be about 52,000. Yeah. Select them all. That's a bit low, 170. Because of the tick boxes again. So unselect, deselect, same thing. That's the number I was looking for. Okay, so I think I'm just about out of time. I'll just go back to the PowerPoint. So we looked at a variety of things. We looked at configuring the features, we looked at the model basics, looping through things, and then we've looked at menus, and we've also looked at buttons as well. Oh, before I finish though, there is a plugin for this, for adding the entries into there. I almost forgot. There's the extend menu, which simplifies things a lot. So you run this at page load, and if I select that, now this triggers the same dynamic action. Which record is this? So I'd recommend this as well. 2458. And if I'm not wrong, this was created by Daniel. Yeah. Okay, just the slides then. I'll give you the final slide. So this is our website, explorer.uk.com/blog. We've got over 100 APEX blogs there, and we tend to keep things updated with a new blog at least once a month, sometimes more than that. Okay, thank you for your time. I would think it would be unlikely. Okay.